is new in town, has taken a wrong turn, and will be here shortly. Do I need to say that again for anybody who didn't hear it? Hi, son, did you hear that? I'm glad you did. All right. You didn't hear it? I will say it again. Yeah, hopefully y'all don't have anywhere to go.
restart this process. That's why I took the screen off so nobody wouldn't be all the way in my business. Office.com. Okay.
We don't. We don't make enough money.
Well, you get a little more than we do.
I might get a little more than you, but that's just like saying that I get my butt kicked.
see that.
Well, you do. You know.
We got who's out there, you know, like.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's not coming up.
I don't give you an address, you can go and talk.
Just want me. Now, if I go to the other one, I can just log in with my email because I took it off the top screen because Office is not working. It's saying it's an Office 365 login, but the screen blank. So you just want me to just go in, log in, and jump in? Okay.
I sent it to you. But I'm trying to make sure.
You know, but both of us like that.
Let me try Google Chrome.
The presentation went to.
Look in your sent box. There it is. Sign in.
We got dual job descriptions,
Come on now, I know I sent it.
but I got the phone
Showing
number.
that it is.
Bob, I got a phone number and address for it.
Is she good looking?
I don't know how's the phone like? I can't see through the phone.
And ask for a phone or a phone number. Jesus.
Okay, it's in the email lately.
You know what? I don't have time for this. 'Cause I got
We're
it.
just gonna do it from the hard copy.
That's fine. I can go in. I'm gonna log in.
Okay.
He said his Darius supposed to come down here.
Okay.
There he is. We'll get it up. Just tell Commissioner Mace Williams to give us 5 minutes. Or less than 5 minutes. Alright. So the presentation has been sent to my email. Jeff told me to sign in through office.com.
Yeah.
When I come in here, if I put in my phone number,
Is it your work email?
it's my work email, but it's I got my cell phone through the Duo.
Do your user ID at augustaj.gov.
Got Augusta what now?
ga.gov. You got extra letter in there.
I know, I'm trying to rush and I'm sideways.
And then put your password in.
Put in.
Yep.
MC.
And Outlook's on the side. On the red.
Okay. So I got this one. Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
See if it's got the attachment to it.
No.
It didn't.
Yeah, there's no attachment.
Yeah, I'm still
I was gonna say. And
Because it'll
Yeah,
tell you.
yeah, right.
wait a minute, Ryan is finna send it from
You
his
got
to
it,
you.
or did you want me to kind of type my address in? Is that a help?
I think I got you. NCFA.
No, that's not it. It's NMC. NMC. FARLEY. and McFarley. Yes. That's the GA.gov.
Oh, I talked with him, and, he was supposed to, he was supposed to send that information back. Ms. Bonner, did he ever send you the information back about the high school board? Remember we agreed to their names? I guess it just repeats the other one, but it was supposed to send,
Here it is.
Yep.
The attachments on there?
Yeah.
Brown's son.
I saw the paperclip before you hovered over it.
Oh, okay, I did.
Yeah, he was supposed to send that name, but Ms. Bonner said they never
That's
sent
my screen right here.
Cool.
his name.
This one.
Yep.
What's his name? So,
You do full screen.
we go in, so if he sends a name, he knows all
Or I can
already.
download it.
And he said he's gonna send back both.
Just make it bigger and start with the slideshow.
So that's the name that's supposed to be coming. He acts like he was pissed off, so he probably just said no. The guy was over it.
It might be a slight delay because it's over the web.
So I can do it advanced.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's backwards, this is,
All right, backwards.
and then make sure you're speaking to the mic.
Okay. All right. Ace.
If they park in front, you know, they only got a couple minutes, they can use their installation of the new. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Good afternoon. We are here for the disparity study. I understand that we are ready to start. So, Ms. Johnson, first, let me check. Ms. Bonner, anything?
Thank you.
Anything, Mr. Attorney? Anything, Ms. Dowes, anything? Ms. Johnson, I turn it over to you.
Good afternoon. I'm Phyllis Johnson, the Director for the Compliance Department, and we are here to discuss the findings and recommendations for the disparity study that has been going on for the past year. The study was conducted by Griffin and Strong, and today we have here Mr. Rodney Strong, who will be going through the presentation for us. And if you have any questions, I guess Mr. Strong will let you know whether or not it would be, he wants you to ask the questions during the presentation, or if he would like for you to hold your questions until after the presentation. Mr. Strong.
Thank you very much, Ms. Johnson, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Feel free to ask questions at any point during my presentation. We are really happy that we've completed this project in terms of making a final report that's been accepted, and we want to present it to you in a way that you can, understand it. So if it's easier for you to hold your questions and ask them at the end, that's fine. But if you'd like to stop me at any point, feel free to do so. And if I go over some things that you're already familiar with, I apologize for that. But I just want to make sure that we're covering all the bases in terms of understanding exactly what the study's about and what we're doing here. And I know that I did a previous session a few weeks ago as the closeout to Mr. Donald's tenure. And so I've gone over some of these things. Some of you all were here for that. But I'm going to just go through everything as briefly as I can in terms of some of the things that I've already previously gone over. And then we'll get down to the specific findings and the final findings that we've had. So just to recap the legal basis for this, of course, there are two major Supreme Court decisions, City of Richmond versus J.A. Croson, which was decided in 1989, and Adirondack Constructors versus Pena, which was decided in 1995 and which affected federal programs. And basically, these two decisions require strict scrutiny of any government action that is seeking to ameliorate any past discrimination or any present discrimination in the marketplace related to minority and women businesses. A number of governments had affirmative action programs prior to these decisions, and it was determined that there had to be a factual basis in evidence. So strict scrutiny is a constitutional term, and it just basically means that the government, before it can take any action, has to have a factual basis in evidence. That means you have to have statistics, you have to have anecdotal evidence, and then you have to use a methodology that the case law sort of lays out in terms of what they consider to be probative evidence, evidence that shows that there is a basis for having some kind of action. And then any type of remedy that you come up with as a government, if you discover that there are some issues that need to be addressed, then those remedies have to be narrowly tailored. That's just a legal term of art that means you have to be very careful to be as least restrictive as possible and have the least possible impact on parties that were not necessarily the people who caused the problem in the first place. And so the first step is to use all the race-neutral measures that you possibly can. Basically, a race-neutral measure is anything that doesn't on its face provide any kind of preference or benefit based on race or gender. So there are a number of things that the courts have determined can be considered to be race-neutral. For instance, if you put in place certain supportive services, bonding assistance, technical assistance, financial assistance, and you limit those to all small businesses, but you don't restrict that in terms of race, those are considered to be race-neutral programs. And of course, you have race and gender conscious programs, and those are programs where you basically say we want to ensure that there is non-discrimination with regard to minority and women-owned businesses in certain categories, and that has to be carefully based on the evidence that you have in front of you and the evidence that will come forward as a result of the study. So the study we did for you had certain parameters. It's for a 5-year period of time, fiscal year 2015 through 2019. And we looked at certain industry categories, general categories: construction, architecture and engineering, professional services, other services. That would be janitorial, other services that are not considered to be professional services. And then goods, those direct goods that you buy as a government. And then we look to see what the relevant geographic market is. And we determined that most of your goods are purchased, most of your construction, most of your architecture and engineering is purchased in the Augusta MSA. But when it comes to certain other services, you reach out as far as the Atlanta MSA in terms of who you buy from. That's not a determination that that's a determination we make by looking at where your spending patterns were in the previous period of time. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of the disparity that we found by industry category. So what we did was we looked at prime and subcontractor disparity combined in the area of construction. And we broke that down by race, gender, and ethnicity. And we only looked at firms that were in the relevant market for that particular procurement category. And so you'll see the total dollars spent. You'll see the percentage of those dollars that went to firms based on their race, gender, and ethnicity. And then you'll see a determination where we made an analysis of whether or not there was underutilization or overutilization. And if you look in that category that says disparate impact of utilization, you'll see that we had underutilization in all categories for all groups except for non-minority males, basically non-MWBE, firms that are not women and not minorities. Those firms were overutilized, and all other firms were underutilized in the construction arena. And this is based on relevant market area, which we use the master vendor file, where do your current vendors come from? And we looked at the distribution of dollars by business ownership, fiscal year, prime plus subcontract. We use payment dollars to analyze that. And so you see those dollars, those are actual dollars, real dollars, actual dollars that were spent in the marketplace. And so when we looked at architectural engineering, we see underutilization for all minority categories in terms of race and ethnicity. But we saw some overutilization for non-minority female firms. And so that's in the architectural and engineering category. We looked at the relevant market, same thing, master vendor file, distribution of dollars actually spent. And when you see the dollars obviously are much smaller in this category during the study period than the construction dollars. And we found statistically significant underutilization in a number of categories. And so then we looked at other professional services. And of course, we saw underutilization in all categories for minority and women-owned businesses. In all categories, we didn't see a lot of dollars spent in those categories. As you can see, you all did not spend a lot of dollars in those professional service categories with minority firms or with women firms. And then we looked at other services, and of course, those are a number of other services that you would purchase that are not construction, not architectural engineering, not professional services. And we show underutilization in all categories for MWBEs, and these are for prime contractors. So if someone had a prime contract to clean the courthouse, or a prime contract for certain other services such as maybe landscape maintenance, that kind of thing, it will be in these categories. And then we looked at goods. Where do you purchase your goods? And of course, this is an area that's challenging to get a lot of MWB participation, especially since you've had the major venture capital firms come in and consolidate office supplies and a number of other things that small firms used to supply. But we see very low utilization, very low numbers, as you can see. And in most categories, we show underutilization, although we show overutilization for Hispanic firms and for Native American firms. The reason the Native American firms are overutilized is because
Can I get you to hold up a second? I'm right here. Mr. Hassan, you had a question?
Yes, Mr. Strong, excuse me. You made mention about, I think it was the goods you were saying, and that pen, paper, and everything. What did you say we kind of did, encapsulated that? Explain that again to me again, please.
Yeah, I was saying that can be a little bit challenging in terms of getting a lot of participation. It's something that does require some effort, because over the last 20 years, there's been a lot of consolidation in certain areas that historically it was easy to get a small firm to do the work in. For instance, office supplies. There used to be an office supply store, a stationery store all on every corner. Now all that's been consolidated with Staples and the other big box retailers. A lot of venture capitalists come into that area. And so to get participation, and some of our clients have been able to get participation in that area, but you have to be a little bit more intentional. And that means you have to basically decide for certain categories, only small businesses will be able to compete for those particular products, that kind of thing.
Okay, all right. Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. And so we did see some overutilization with Hispanic firms in this prime goods category, and Native American firms showed some overutilization. It wasn't really a lot of money that was spent, only $147,000, but they just have such low availability in the marketplace. Not a lot of Native American, owned businesses in this marketplace. And of course, there are historic reasons for that. And so what we did on this chart is to just kind of make it easy for you by looking at the categories. And so you can look across. If you look at African American owned firms, you see statistically significant underutilization in every category. If you look at Asian American firms, you see statistically significant underutilization in every category. With Hispanic firms, you see statistically significant underutilization in every category except goods. Native American firms, statistically significant underutilization in every category except goods. And then if you look at non-minority white women-owned firms, you see statistically significant underutilization in every category except architecture and engineering. And so what this chart does is sort of say this is where we can use our recommendations to enhance what we're doing. You know, the whole reason for doing the study is so you can say, hey, where are we spending? What does the marketplace look like? How do we want to direct our spending in such a way that we can have a policy impact without violating any kind of constitutional requirements? And so what we've done is we've said there are statistically significant levels of underutilization in all of these categories, and therefore these are important areas, and our recommendations are really driven by these findings. And so I'm going to next go into talking a little bit about our findings and what we consider to be, I didn't go through my subcontractor disparities. So we found for all of the subcontractors, and we looked at, we pulled as much subcontractor information as we could. We did surveys, we did a number of other things to get subcontractor data. And as you can see, you see statistically significant underutilization in all categories except, of course, women in the area of non-minority women, in the area of A&E, and in construction, the underutilization for non-minority women is not statistically significant. Every other category you see underutilization. So that gives you the playing field we're working with from a disparity standpoint. So one of the things that happens in this business is that from time to time, a firm will conduct a disparity study and there will be a program put in place and there'll be a challenge to the program, or sometimes in a challenge to the program, they'll say, well, the study didn't look at this properly. And so the courts have kind of shaped how you do this. And one of the things that was an argument that used to be made at one point with disparity studies was, well, you're not really looking at whether or not these firms, you're looking at raw numbers of firms, but you're not looking at whether or not these firms are capable of actually doing all of the work that's available to them, that you would expect to be available to them. And so one of the ways to get at responding to that, the courts have basically, in the lower courts, there haven't been any other Supreme Court decisions, but there have been Circuit Court of Appeals decisions that have basically said that you can do a statistical regression analysis where you hold constant certain factors, such as the number of years a firm has been in business, the education of the owners, the training of the owners, the number of employees, certain other factors, and then you'll make a determination. So we ran a regression analysis. And our regression analysis found that disparities by race, ethnicity, or gender status of firms' owners remained after controlling for capacity and other race and gender neutral factors. So when we control from a statistical standpoint, we found that these disparities were still present. And we also did a lot of work in the area of anecdotal evidence. And that's important because it helps shape people's perception of what is really going on. It really helps you understand, and that part of the report, and it's a pretty substantial part of the report, we took evidence from individual interviews. We randomly selected people in every category, including non-minority males, non-minority females, minority males, minority females in every category, ethnicity, gender, everything. We took random samples in every category and did in-depth interviews. We also had a website that it allowed people to make comments by email and return email comments. We also reached out to all of the organizations that are in the community and interviewed the people in the organizations and asked them to have their members comment. We did focus groups where we got in depth with people about why they thought they were experiencing certain problems in the marketplace. And all that's written up in a very robust chapter of the disparity study, which I'm summarizing in one line in this presentation to basically say we've had robust anecdotal findings that support the statistical analysis and that support the regression analysis. And so based on that, if you look at our third bullet point, we found that Augusta should continue its race and gender neutral programs, and that there is, and we're recommending that there be some race and gender conscious efforts. In other words, we think that you can continue all of your race neutral efforts, enhance some of your race and gender neutral efforts, but we think that you do have a legal, statistical, and anecdotal basis for moving forward with certain race and gender conscious elements that are narrowly tailored to address problems that we identified in the marketplace. So that's basically what our overall finding, and that's just a general overall findings. And so based on those findings, which we support in depth in the full disparity study, we have a number of recommendations. And so I just want to go through those with you, and that's obviously the heart and the meat of your concern as policymakers, as those charged with the ultimate responsibility of ensuring that the taxpayers' dollars are well spent and that people are treated fairly in the process. And so we're recommending that there be an enhancement of race-neutral local small business opportunity program efforts. In other words, we think that there are certain things that could be done that wouldn't implicate race or gender, that would help all small businesses, but that would make a more equal, more fair playing field in terms of certain supportive services, in terms of certain things like financial assistance, bonding assistance, technical assistance. That doesn't mean you necessarily lead with those things. Some of our clients are already giving, say, small grants to community-based organizations to do certain things, or working with banks in the community to do certain things. We're recommending that some of that be coordinated with the local SBDC, Small Business Development Center, and with the regional SBA office and other forces that are in the community to make sure that there is a clear opportunity for people to receive technical assistance, financial assistance, and bonding assistance. And we're also recommending subcontractor goals, especially in construction A&E, where it lends itself to that, and to a certain degree in other professional services. As we saw, there was very low participation in professional services other than architectural and engineering. And sometimes when there is a subcontractor goal, hey, yeah, we'll give you the contract. I'm a lawyer. One of the areas that has really helped grow minority and women-owned law firms is that many jurisdictions say, hey, if we're going to issue bonds, you're going to have a minority firm that's part of the team that does the bond counsel work, or that does the underwriters counsel work, or that it serves as issuers counsel. I'm just using that as one example, but there are a number of professional service disciplines in which subcontractor goals work. Of course, in construction, subcontracting is the natural industry practice, and we're recommending what we call robust good faith efforts. In other words, you got to come in here and show us that you have reached out to all of the available firms, that you've made them aware, that you've developed certain attempts to do business with them if you are not going to come in with the goal, and you've got to show that there's some basis for that. In other words, the pricing was just so far out of line that you couldn't make it work, other kinds of things. And so we're recommending that. And of course, it works in tandem with the race neutral measures, because part of what you do is a certain amount of outreach, a certain amount of forecasting. I'm not going to get into a lot of detail about that, but basically what we like to call contract compliance 101 needs to be enhanced. We do more contract compliance to get more participation across the board in every area. And we're also recommending annual aspirational goals. So we're recommending basically that you set goals and say on an aspirational basis, based on our availability that we know about from the disparity study, we're in these categories, we would like to see this much participation. That doesn't mean you're going to get it on every contract. But that means that on some contracts you look at it and you say, hey, there's an opportunity to go beyond our aspirational goal. And in some contracts you say, well, there's a reason that we're not going to be able to, reach an aspirational goal on this one. So that's why we call it an aspirational goal, because it's not a requirement, it's not a quota. It's not something that you say, if you don't have this, you're not going to get the contract. But it's something where you say on every contract, we're striving for this because overall we want to hit a number that we think is in line with where we ought to be in terms of participation. And then, of course, and we're just generally recommending that you enhance and strengthen contract compliance generally. That just means that you'll have more probably monitoring of the process, more work on ensuring a number of other elements are there to ensure that you can get more participation. And we're recommending, as recommendation number 5, an increase in outreach improvement. One of the things that we found in one city that has done a really good job with this, that's a client of ours, is Metro Nashville government. They've done a really good job of doing more outreach, and it's enhanced their ability to get more participation. And another city that we've worked with, City of Chicago, started a program of forecasting, and we're recommending that to all of our clients these days because it's been so successful. And what that just means is this. That's the 6th, forecasting. What that means is this. A lot of times you go in to the budget cycle and you come out and you will or will not do a particular thing. Okay? We got money in the budget to, do some work on a particular project, or we got a certain amount of SPLOST money that we're going to use for this, or whatever. But what helps is if you know that you're going to have a project that's going to be put in place a year from now, is that if you have the Office of Contract Compliance basically working on the front end to ensure that all of the minority and women-owned businesses are aware of the project, know what the requirements of the project are going to be, and of course, to the extent that you can make them aware, begin to provide supportive services to them on the front end so that they can begin to line up their bonding, begin to line up their financing, begin to do the things that are necessary to be competitive when that RFP hits the street or when that bid hits the street. And so this forecasting process has been very effective. We've spent time in Chicago looking at how they do it. We've recommended it to other clients who've implemented it, and it's had very strong success. And we think that this is something that would be great for you to do. And of course, whenever you try talking about doing all this kind of work, it's going to definitely probably require some additional staffing. Sometimes that can be, you can team with other entities to do other kinds of things. You can be creative about it, but at the end of the day, somebody's got to do the work. And so we're recommending that you look at your allocation of resources to provide a more robust program. And then finally, number 8, something that we think very strongly about, and we've got something in the report about it, and we're also working on a standalone document that we're providing just to give some more detailed technical recommendations on what can be done to capture all of the data so that the next time you get ready to do a disparity study, it'll be easier to do and you'll have more robust information in areas that you typically don't capture, like, for instance, all of the subcontractors that were solicited on every procurement, so that there can be no question in terms of what the pool of subcontractor dollars are. Those kinds of data reforms are also part of our recommendations, and they're in the study as well. And so that's the heart of our recommendations. And I just want to hit one more set of points, and want to talk about next steps. And basically what we're recommending is that, obviously we're asking you to accept the report and the recommendations that we just went over. We will work with your team looking at what we call a gap analysis. What needs new authorization? What's just an enhancement to your existing program? We will help in terms of determining the aspirational goals, which are really internal benchmarks of what the percentage participation is expected to be on an annual basis. And then, we'll work with you to create a narrowly tailored process, and then help you plan for implementation steps, and help you determine your budget and staffing needs so they can come back and make the proper requests for you and help you develop a training protocol. So this is just our the way we look at contract compliance. You've heard me reference contract compliance several times. We think that you can most be effective when you have an assessment, when you do outreach, when you have some kind of a certification program. All of that doesn't have to be in-house, but it has to be coordinated. When you have an aggressive procurement process, where you're looking at every solicitation and you're looking where the participation can be. And then where you have a monitoring program and a compliance program to ensure that people are not just coming in saying, yeah, I'm going to use John Doe, and then you find out that John Doe was never even contacted and never used on the job. That just doesn't work, and so you have to have some monitoring. Also, you can't have a situation where people are basically, acting as if they are doing work and really just basically, for lack of a better term, fronting. You want to weed any kind of fraud in your program out, because that hurts the government, it hurts the program, and it makes it difficult long term. So you have to have adequate safeguards to ensure that doesn't happen. Okay. So I really appreciate all of you all for letting me go on and on and on and on, and I'm available for as many questions as you have for me. Thank you so much.
Yeah, let me start up. Thank you so much for the report. I know some others have some questions, but I have one right now. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, basically what we're looking at is contracts with the city, where it's going, whether it's going to a minority, a black, Native American, or someone who's white. We're looking at women and so forth and so on. So my question is, how do you assure, in your report basically said what we already thought, how do you assure that more blacks are going to get contracts? How do you assure that more women are going to get contracts? How does that process work when, for lack of a better phrase or thought or what have you, when you're looking at certain construction projects and you know that there are very few minorities that have the capacity of the business to do this, how do we award the contract to them as opposed to an R.W. Allen or somebody like that? I mean, how do we get there?
Yeah, I understand. Well, I think we've pioneered a number of models around the country in various jurisdictions. So if you're talking about a prime contract, depends on the size of the prime contract. So one of the things we look at is, what are your average contracts in certain areas? And what you're going to find is that in certain areas of contracting, for instance, say parks and recreation, you'll find that a smaller general contractor can do that job, that whole job. It might be putting in a ball field. It might be putting in a small building, in a park. For other very large projects, you might not have a firm that's ready to do everything yet. They might not have the capacity. So that's why we recommend that you do some kind of assessment. And that's why I went back to this slide, that you do some kind of assessment on the front end, looking at your actual projected expenditures for the upcoming year and saying, look, these are the kind of projects we have. What kind of firms do we have? And this is the kind of work that contract compliance ought to be doing. What kind of firms are out here in the marketplace that can actually do this kind of work? that don't need any help at all. It's sort of a triage method, to be honest with you. Some firms don't need any help at all. Some firms clearly are performing services in the marketplace, but they have weaknesses. You know, they might not have a bonding line. They might not have financial wherewithal to carry a larger project. And so for those firms, you provide them with access to supportive services. You might put them with SBA to get an SBA bonding, begin the process of an SBA bonding line. They might get supportive services. You know, DOT, Georgia DOT, GDOT, has a supportive services program which they can be referred to. There's a small business development center that they can be referred to. So if you start early, some of the firms that are in that second category, you know, can get that opportunity to maybe perform at a prime level or at least perform as what we call a first-tier subcontractor level on that project. So forecasting and then doing that assessment, then doing that outreach is what we consider to be the front end of ensuring your availability pool is really there when you get ready to go to your procurement phase. And so it does require front-end work. It's not, you know, it's not easy work, but it's work that is worth it, because as you become a community that is recognized as providing opportunities, more people begin to come to seek those opportunities, you know, and you get growth. And you get growth among your existing firms. And so, you know, I could stand up here and tell you the stories of many firms that started out. The largest African-American owned construction company in the country right now is a company that, when I was director of contract compliance, I helped them get their first contract, which was putting a bridge over the Marta Gulch so that underground Atlanta could be built over the top of it. And this guy had never had a contract before, but he had a business and he had experience. He had worked with Bechtel. He had a degree in architecture. He had all of the pieces, but he had never done a project to that size. And he ended up having to get his bonding through SBA. He'll tell you today, he started out in SBA. Now he's the biggest African-American contractor, not in the state, but in the country. So a lot of it is business development. A lot of it is working with these firms on the front end so that they can go from wherever they are to the next level.
And so what you're saying is that those people who want to do business with Augusta in the future really need to be in some kind of, I don't know if it's classes, training, or whatever now, so that when the bids do come out.
Well, that's why I use the term triage, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just call me whatever you're going to call me.
I was about to call you commissioner, but I know you all have a consolidated government. But Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, the reason that I use the word triage is you got some firms in the marketplace that could take on a project today. If your policies are such where you say, hey, you need to team to larger firms, if it's a particularly large project, you have to have a joint venture, you know, then those firms can team on those large projects at the prime contractor level, or they can take on certain larger, you know, first tier contractor or subcontractor roles. But then you got other firms that are going to need more support. They're going to need what we talked about, some supportive services. And then you got some firms that just aren't quite ready yet for government contracting, and they can go through classes and those other kinds of things. So it's a process, but you want to have that process because it's going to enhance the growth of your business community.
Gotcha. And I think we want to make sure this goes well. We want to make sure that we don't just put disparity study on the shelf and never look at it again. We want to make sure that we take into consideration what you're telling us and we move forward. I just don't want us to look at it 3 years from now and it's still where it is, because there's going to definitely have to be some growth in the Black community, Asian community, and Hispanic community when it comes to being able to take on large projects. So we just can't give them projects just because they're Black or because they're Asian or they're Native American. We can give them projects because they can do the job.
Yes, sir.
And they can get it done. And I don't know. Anybody else with any questions? Mr. Hassan?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Mr. Griffin, thank you very much for the presentation. My first question is probably what your final comment was, in essence, was you would like for us to adopt the disparity study that you've provided to us. So we're at that point where we need to put this on the committee cycle and get it before the commission to approve it. That's what you're saying to us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's the first phase of it. So I'm gonna go back to page 12 from there, page 12. Page 12 is where you started with the recommendations.
Yes, sir.
So once we go before the commission and get it approved that we accept the study, then we begin to work on these enhancements here that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And with these enhancements, it comes that you all are on board with us as we begin to do these things.
Yes, sir. When we received this contract, it put in place a line item for us to assist you with your implementation phase.
Okay. So at this point, once we do this, and this is a direct question, kind of like, at this point, this was just a compliance for us, for the government. It's been more of a compliance issue in getting the data that you've done the disparity study. So once the commission approve it, now we bring procurement fully on board, because now we're doing procurement rules and regulations, right? So now they come to the table at that point.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
So just want to make sure of that. Okay. Well, I'm fine. I'm fine with it. Thank you very much. I just want to make sure we know Ms. Bonner to put this on the agenda for us, or the committee cycle for us, so we can go ahead and get the commission to approve it, and so we can start putting that together. Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead.
Commissioner, if you don't mind, can the compliance department put in an agenda item once they are ready to have it placed on the next committee cycle? Because I do know that there are some additional ordinance changes and amendments that they would like to propose in addition to the recommendations and the findings of the study that's presented today.
Oh, that's fine with me. I just wanted to be honest. So you're saying hold off and not put on the next committee cycle with that?
I'm saying let the compliance department enter an agenda rather than having Ms. Bonner place it on the next committee cycle. I understood that to be your request, to have Ms. Bonner place it on the next committee cycle.
So let me understand. I think I hear what you're saying. You're saying that from conversation with compliance, there's some additional information that she wants to bring forward.
That's correct.
Right now?
No, not today. When we have another committee session, I'm asking for the compliance department to place it on the agenda rather than you instructing Ms. Bonner to place it on the next committee cycle.
But I'm still trying to, what I'm confused about, Ms. Dowers, what I'm confused about, there still has to be some changes going to be made. And so we're just trying to get this. So if Ms. Phillips, you've had a conversation with her and there's some additional information need to go with that, that's fine. But I'm understanding this, all that's going to come aboard once we approve the study.
What's next Tuesday? Our next one is the 26th. 26th. And what's the first one in May? Committee meeting? May 10th. 10th.
Commissioner, I retract my request.
Okay, because it still doesn't preclude compliance from putting it on there because it's coming by way of that department, and she can put it on there. But I thought all the other things would have to be worked on because you got to bring procurement up to the table. We start making policy changes. So I'm fine with that. Ms. Phillips can still into the system, but we can approve it. So I back off of me saying it, Ms. Bonner, and get it from Ms. Phillips. Okay, thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem.
Anybody else? Dennis, I know you have a question. You don't? Workmate Knight, I know you have a question.
Not today.
Not today.
I enjoy listening to.
I guess you just covered everything. I think our main concern is how do we implement?
Yes, sir.
And I think you guys said you would work with us. How do we implement? How do we get it to where we need to get it, to? How do we get more blacks involved? How do we get, like you said, your forecasting? How do we get more people involved? I get calls all the time from folks who want to get in on what we're doing with the city of Augusta, and there's a process. And then you have to have bonding. Some have bonding, some don't have bonding, and so forth, and then training. So we just look forward to you guys coming back to us with a definite plan. If we don't have anything else, Ms. Bonner, anything?
That's it.
Ms. Attorney, anything? Ms. Administrator, anything? Ms. Johnson, you still down there? You got anything? No. All right, we're adjourned.
All right.
Hold on. Do we need to take a motion? I'm just joking. Anything else you want to say, sir?
No, just it's been a pleasure working with you all, and I'm looking forward to helping you with this next phase. That's the good part.
I got you. Thank you.